Hello, and today I'm going to be making this pattern, which is a cute 1950s bolero, and I'm making the bolero from an original pattern, so it doesn't have any printed pattern markings, just those little perforations. So we'll see how I get on with those. Boleros were perfect for the 1950s dresses because they kind of hit the waistline where the these little noses, I put my hands down, hits the waistline where the accidentally stroking a nose, where the skirts flared out, so they added a little bit of width here, and then cut off at the waist where the flare of the skirt started, and they're a little bit more casual, I think, than 1940s jackets, like an alternative to a cardi, but slightly smarter. I think boleros could be due for a bit of a comeback, actually, don't you? Because you're not as sort of trussed up as you are in the 1940s jacket. It's like a little thing that you can shrug on like a cardi, and obviously have in any fabric you want. I must show you what I'm wearing today, which is a 1930s dress, and I bought it at the Vintage Textile and Antiques Fair. I try not to buy too much vintage because obviously I'm actually making dresses all the time, so do I need more? But where I see one that has either very interesting construction details or a fabulous print, I cannot resist. And this was mainly the colour and the print I couldn't resist, but it also has this rather sweet little pleating into these bows, which I thought was rather sweet too. So I'll just quickly stand up so you can see it, a bit more of it. That was it. Anyway, I shall get on with that bolero, and we shall see at the end if I'm as enthusiastic about boleros at the end of the process as I am at the start. I started by tracing all the pattern pieces onto pattern cutting paper. That took quite a while before just pinning them onto my linen fabric and cutting them out. I started by stitching the darts. This is in the back of the bodice, and I later realised should have been stitched in the front of the bodice too. And the large fold over labels at the front of the bolero need to be interfaced. So I'm just showing you those sections there, which will ultimately be covered by these facing pieces, which is sewn right side to right side and then folded over. And one side of the collar is also interfaced, and then the two collar sections are stitched right side to right side around the edges, leaving a gap in the centre to turn out. And the large fold back cuffs on the bolero are also interfaced on one of their sections and then stitched in much the same way as the collar, right side to right side around most of the edges, leaving a gap to turn them through to the right side. And of course there are two cuffs in all. The collar and both the cuffs are pinned right side to right sides before stitching. And then I belatedly realised when the facing didn't quite fit that there are underarm darts in the front bodice that need to be stitched as well. I wonder if I would ever cope with the speed of an industrial machine. Probably not. Here I'm stitching the darts and then around the edges of the collar and the cuffs. The cuffs are each stitched at the ends and across the widest edge. Of course, you don't need to stitch the inner edge, as that is going to be joined in a seam with the sleeve later on. It's a fascinating life for a dog, living with someone who sews a lot. And here are the cuffs all turned right side out and pressed in place. Well, you can see that unfinished seam that's going to be joined to the sleeve, and then the collar as well, which of course is going to be joined to the top of the bodice. Then I've also pressed down the dart on the underarm seam at the front bodice. And then I'm joining the front bodice to the back bodice, initially wrong sides together because I'm going to do French seams. And I'm joining first of all the shoulder seams and then the underarm seams. And then the two facing pieces are just stitched together at the short end to form one long piece. And here I am just doing all those French seams at the shoulders and the underarm seams and just on that facing piece too. And then I just set the machine to its longest stitch because I want to do some gathering stitches along the top of the sleeve head between the notches, and I'm just stitching those long stitches 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And then with the collar pinned to the top of the bodice, that large facing piece is pinned right around the whole thing, so it encloses a part of the neck edge, and then it keeps going all the way round that curve of the bodice, as you can see here. And I'm just going to stitch this on right side to right side and then turn it through, so I'm just matching the seams, and I'm going to turn it then through to the inside, and I will turn under the edge of that facing piece and then slip stitches in place. And here I am just sewing on the facing. And then I'm on to attaching the cuffs to the sleeve. And as you can see, the cuffs, the opening has to lie on the outside of the sleeve. So what I'm going to do is to fold the sleeve in half to find the centre point, and then pin that centre point to the underarm seam of the sleeve. And then by the time I reach the outside of the sleeve, that opening should be in exactly the right place. And I did spend a little while just tweaking the underarm seam to make sure that the edges of the cuff met exactly at that centre point. You don't want a gap and you don't want them overlapping. They need to meet exactly. And there is a facing the cuff and the sleeve, and I'm just pinning that over the cuff there, as you can see, and I've turned under the edges of the cuff, and that's it stitched in place. So you can see that what you then do is to turn the facing onto the inside of the sleeve, and then I'll press that neatly down in place there, and the facing is then slip stitched onto the inside of the sleeve, and then the cuff will be turned up and pressed in place as I'm showing you there. And this is what the sleeve and cuff with the facing look like on the inside. And then I'm just going to turn them right side out. And then I pull up the gathering stitches on the sleeve head before I'm inserting the sleeves into the bodice. And I made a couple of little shoulder pads too. And here is the finished bolero. And yes, it is the Walkaway dress again. It never quite goes away, does it? I mean, one of the reasons that, well, the two reasons actually that I chose to do the bolero for this dress. One is I had lots of that olivey linen fabric left from doing the Walkaway dress. And the other, I'm just pointing out that brooch on the lapel. You might remember that the bolero had buttons on the pattern, but I chose not to put them on because I thought I have so many vintage brooches and they could look really pretty just shown off on these lapels. And some of you might be thinking she could have pressed that bolero a bit better. And you'd be right. The thing is that I was kind of running out of time to get this outfit on, rush out into the garden, do the videoing, do the editing. So Please forgive the slightly linen-y crumpled look, but overall I am really pleased with this little bolero, and I think with a good press it's going to look even better. And it really wasn't very difficult to sew. I mean, I have to confess that the unpicker did come out a few times, but that was mainly because of the original pattern just being full of perforations for the markings. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I didn't transfer all the dart markings over until too late, and I realised there should be darts where there weren't any and had to go back to the original pattern. But now I have a complete traced off pattern with dart markings and everything. I could make this bolero. Well, everything always takes me ages, to be honest. Thank you so much for watching me. I hope you'll like this video and consider subscribing.